All right, everybody, what's up? We got a problem here to work, so let's go ahead and get started on it. Now, how in the world are we supposed to work this problem? E to the x minus 12 over e to the x equals negative 2. Well, think back a long time ago when you first started algebra and you were solving equations with fractions in them, okay? What did you do to solve equations that had fractions in them? I don't know if your teacher taught you to do this, to solve them like this. If they didn't, what I'm fixing to say, if they didn't, then go tell your teacher they need to start doing that, okay? Whenever you have a fraction in an equation, get the common denominator, multiply everything through by the common denominator. What's our common denominator? It is e to the x. So I'm going to multiply everything by e to the x. See, that's all I'm doing, multiplying everything by the common denominator. All right. And so this is e to the x times e to the x. Well, what do? When the bases are the same and you're multiplying, you add the exponents, right? Well, what's x plus x? 2x. The e to the x's cancel out, so that's minus 12 equals negative 2 e to the x. All right, so this is starting to look like something now. Let's move this. Let's add 2 e to the x to both sides. And so that's going to give me e to the 2x plus 2e to the x minus 12 equals 0. All right. Now, how do we go about solving this? Well, this thing is quadratic in form, right? It's quadratic in form. In other words, well, what does that mean? Well, if you take the middle term, don't worry about the 2, just the e to the x. If you take that e to the x and you square it, you'll end up with this first term. Okay, so let's come over to the side and write that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let u equal e to the x, and then I'm going to square both sides. And so u squared is e to the 2x. See there? So I let u equal e to the x, and then I took both sides of this, and I squared it. And I ended up with u squared equals e to the 2x. I ended up with that first term. That tells me this equation here is quadratic in form. All right. All right. So now, what I want to do is this e to the x here, I want to replace it with u, and this e to the 2x, I want to replace it with u squared. So why am I doing that? Well, let's see. Let's just do it. U squared plus 2u minus 12 equals 0. Well, that looks familiar, doesn't it? That's just a simple quadratic equation to solve. You see that? A simple quadratic equation to solve. All right. Now, how do we solve the quadratic equation? Well, set everything equal to 0 and factor it, right? So I need two numbers that will multiply to give me negative 12 and add together to give me positive 2. Well, let's see. I got 12 and 1. That'll give me 12, but that won't add up to 2. And really we're finding, well, 12 and negative 1. 12 plus negative 1 is 11. So, that's not going to work. 4 and negative 3, 6 and negative 2. None of those differences will give me 2 as an answer. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, it means it won't factor. Okay? It doesn't factor. So what do? Well, we've got two options, don't we? We can either use the quadratic formula or we can complete the square. Which one do we want to do? Doesn't matter. We can do either one. Honestly, for this one, completing the square is the easiest because this term right here, this 2, it's an even number, so it's easier to complete the square. And I'm going to go ahead and complete the square on this one because I have a feeling most of you know how to do the quadratic formula already, but you don't really remember how to complete the square, or typically students have more trouble completing the square than they do using the quadratic formula. So I'm going to complete the square on it. Yes, if you wanted to, you can use the quadratic formula. If you need some help on quadratic formula, just search my channel, solving equations using quadratic formula, or just type in quadratic formula and video will pop up. You can watch it. But let's complete the square. So we got to move the 12 over. All right, so that's u squared plus 2u equals, remember, leave that space there, equals 12. So you half the 2, half of 2 is 1, and then 1 squared is 1. And so I got to add the 1 to both sides, and this will factor into u plus 1 squared. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about this right here because at this point you're already supposed to know how to do this, and that equals 13. And so I get u plus 1 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 13. So then I'm going to subtract 1, so I get u equals -1 plus or minus the square root of 13. And so that is going to give me u equals -1 plus the square root of 13, or u equals -1 minus the square root of 13. All right, so now what do? Well, we solve for u, but that's not what we're trying to do. We got to solve for x. Our equation is in terms of x, so we need to know what x is. Well, you see here, I have, excuse me, I have u. What is u? U is e to the x. So I'm going to put e to the x in the place of u. And so that's going to give me e to the x equals -1 plus square root of 13, or e to the x equals -1 minus square root of 13. Now, at this point, yeah, I mean, you're going to need to take your calculator out and type in -1 plus square root of 13, and that is e to the x is equal to I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places, 2.61. All right. And so now I need to solve this. So how do I solve that? Well, I'm going to take the natural log of both sides. Remember, when you're solving an exponential equation and you can't get the bases the same, then you take the natural log of both sides. Natural log or the log, natural log or log base 10 of both sides, whichever one you want is fine. And so this is going to give me x is equal to natural log of 2.61. Well, what happened there? What happened to that? Well, where did the x come from? Okay, so let's look at that. Remember, there is a property that says the log of b to the x with base b is equal to x. The base of the log and the base of the exponent, if they're the same, your answer is your exponent. Well, look at this. Natural log e to the x. Remember, natural log is the same thing as log base e. So the base of the log, the base of the exponent are the same, so your answer is your exponent x. All right. Now, you can, if you want to, you can waste your time with this one right here, or you can just say, well, that's no solution. Because remember, if you have a number, raising it to a power, you're never going to get a negative answer. In other words, e to the x, no matter what you plug in for x, you're never going to get a negative number. And negative 1 minus square root of 13, well, what's the square root of 13? 3 point something, right? Square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 16 is 4. So the square root of 13 is somewhere in between there. So we've got negative 1 minus 3 point something, which is going to give us negative 4 point something. Can't happen. Okay? But let's just suppose we don't see that. Okay? Let's suppose we don't recognize that, and we plug that into our calculator. Negative 1 minus square root of 13. That's negative e to the x equals negative 4.61. I mean, like I said, this part right here, you don't have to do this part, but just in case some of you do, let's just go through it and I'll show you what happens. All right. And so now we take the natural log of both sides. That equals the natural log of negative 4.61, and that would give us x equals the natural log of negative 4.61. Okay. And we know that's not going to work. You can't take the log of a negative number. And if you don't believe me, plug it in your calculator and you can see. And so there you go. That's not it. This is the only answer you would have. And I don't know, your teacher might want you to punch that into your calculator since it didn't factor and it's a decimal there. So you would actually get x equals 0.9594. There's more decimals. I just rounded it. All right. So I hope that helped. Check out my other videos. Give me a like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. And I'll see y'all later.